My name is Dr. Ethan Raath, and I'm here today to do an introductory program that I present called Whole Brain Empowerment for Leaders and Teams. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. We should remember that story from our childhood about the little train, the little engine that could, as he's pulling this load up the mountain. I think I can. I think I can. And finally gets to the top. I think I can. And as he goes over, he says, I knew I could. 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 Well, there's more to it than the story about the little train. It's also the story about the engineer. When they got over the mountain, he turned to his assistant and he said, I didn't think we were going to make it over. His assistant said, yeah, I know. That's why I kept my hand on the brake. From that little illustration, what thoughts come to your mind about the experience of leadership? First of all, I have a slide about the wheel of life. Work, life, community, religion, all those things. And in the center, I talk about values and hope and purpose, passion that a person has that needs to be the center, that feeds into everything else. Because if there isn't a hub, then the wheel is going like this down the road. There needs to be something that holds on. But you can't be one thing at home and another thing at work and another thing in the community. And on the wheel of work, we play roles as leader, manager, team member, perhaps as we're moving up and changing. But you can't move into a position and not be who you are. It will always come through. And so it's knowing yourself, your real core, your purpose, your passion, what your gifts are, what your talents, that enable you to feed into these different positions. But one of the challenges in leadership is that when you reach that level and all of this is going on, you tend to want to be all things to all people, or it's expected of you. And you can't. If you're the engineer, you're not the stoker putting the coal in the engine. If you try and do that, you've got to let go of the other thing. And so leaders face a lot of challenges, but they also have joy and satisfaction and success. But I've wanted to share today the thought that if you really have a sense of who you are and what it is you enjoy doing, what you do well, that greater success will come. Communication, engagement, productivity, and that applies just as well for your team. And so one concept of way of looking at that is through the idea of what we call whole brain empowerment. Back in the 60s, a professor from Georgia State, from University of Georgia, came up with the theory of the left brain, right brain functioning. Won a Nobel Prize for that. And one of his students, Dr. Kobus Neethling, also from South Africa, went back and developed a program, a profile, based on thinking preferences. Not your personality or your skills, but the way we think is the way we like to, shows the way we like to live and work. Because we have come so far from the old left brain, right brain program, we recognize that in the middle of the brain is something called the corpus callosum. It's this multitude of fibers that are connecting us so that our brain is crossing over in microseconds all the time in order to use different parts of the brain to function in the moment in what we need. But in terms of the big picture, it helps to know which parts of the brain shape who we are and what our preferences are and can enable us to work and lead better. So Neethling developed a program called the Neethling Brain Instruments and uses the quadrant, which has been used by others. But in this case, again, the focus is on preferences, thinking preferences. And we're not being literal about the left brain, right brain. We're using it as a metaphor in this presentation. So what we see here is the realist, analyst, what we call L1 in that top quadrant. Below that, the preserver, organizer, person who is results driven, not different. Strategist, imagineer, vision driven, and socializer, empathizer, people driven. And so we find with the realist, analyst are people who like to do research and explore and go in depth and analyze and take the ideas that have been developed by the strategist and the imagineer and see how practical they are or how they can be implemented, how they can be put together. The preserver and the organizer is the one who makes sure that the business, the organization is running well, so these ideas that have been developed can be implemented and in turn can be marketed and sold and communicated and negotiated and relate with the customers through the socializer and the empathizer. So this is also an illustration of how the team works, that when you're hiring, when you look at your team, do you have too many people on one side or the other? When you're hiring someone and we say, we need someone with these particular skills, you narrow down your field and then bring me in to help you say what kind of person, which one of these people actually like to do that kind of work. It's not just about the skills, but it's the preferred. Because people can have skills in something, they've done it for years, they don't really like doing it. You can be, a bank teller and not love doing it because you'd really prefer to be doing something else. So that we can't get stuck. And one of the things is that we will look at is how there's usually two dominant preferences. And the profile that I use goes on to break this down into 8 quadrants. So it shows you if you're more of a realist than an analyst, more of a preserver or organizer, more of a strategist than an imagineer, more of a socializer and an empathizer. This is my profile. I'm way out here on the strategist imagineer. I've always got in trouble because my administration has been terrible as a leader. It's what people complain about, that I don't do that enough. And when I saw this profile, I understood why. But I couldn't have put this slide presentation today if I didn't know how to organize something. But I can't do it all the time. A realist analyst looks small. I couldn't have earned my doctorate if I didn't know how to be a researcher and an analyst. I couldn't be a professor if I didn't know how to research my field and my discipline and how to put it together and present. But then the real fun is when I'm standing up in front of the classroom, standing up in front of you, presenting these ideas and thoughts that I have. That's when I'm most comfortable. So the idea of the brain preferences in practice, different people think in different ways. Some are logical, some are organized, systemic, others unorganized, strategic. We drive each other crazy unless we can see how we work together. So the first step, which we will touch on in a moment, is knowing yourself and your preferences, and then in turn knowing your team and their preferences. And I will be giving an illustration of how I work to help that come together. So as you look at this profile and think about this profile, where do you think you fit? I want to give an illustration of how I used this in a setting. There was a woman who came to town. She was newly appointed as a regional vice president for a region for a financial company, services company. And we met early on after she had been in her new position. And she heard about my work, and we went to have lunch, and she said, I want you to fix my team. And the first thing was, well, in order to fix your team, I got to work with you, because as the leader is, so is the team. Well, I started by doing individual sessions, listening sessions with the team members. And then afterwards, we ran their profiles, and I spent time talking to them about their profiles. But what emerged was that the previous leader was a real analyzer in the financial business. So he loved to sit in his office in front of the computer and look at the trends and everything was going on. And he left the team just to do their own thing. This leader, new leader came in, and she was micromanaging everything, wanting to be in on everything, wanting to know what everybody was doing. So I ran her profile, and then this is the personal profile. We also have the leadership profile. So it shows your preferred style of working, but it also shows your preferred style of leadership. And she was big out here on the Imagineer, and her leadership was the same. And so I was able to point out to her that perhaps as a new person, she needed to be micromanaging in touch, learning about the whole business. But at some point, she was going to have to trust her folks, and she was going to have to move into this to be the representative in the community and the spokesperson and larger for the company. Running the profiles for everyone else, they had so much fun getting to recognize each other, and especially in communication, because this lady here was just so organized, and someone said to her, you keep asking for more information. I must give you everything up front. She said, yes, please. And this person was, don't bother you with the details. You just want the big pictures. So in my last session with them, after we'd been through this as a group and had fun, I said, how's it working? One of the team members said, you know, we had a meeting the other day where we had to share some extra work. And we were saying, is this something you'd like to do? He said, I've never been in a meeting like that before, because we usually say, do you have time to do this? He said, it's totally different. Mm-hmm. So that's one practical application of how it applies. In an extended workshop, I would help you use this profile as a handout where you could list your responsibilities and then see what those responsibilities match: realist, analyst, preserver, organizer, and so on. And knowing what your preferences are, you can see, am I really working in my area of preference? And if I'm not, do my preferences match my current leadership? Is it aligned? Is it misaligned? What do I need to develop? What responsibilities do I need to share? And we would do the same for the team. You as a leader would look at your team, run a profile, recognize what their preferences were, and then line it up to their work responsibility. Because I also work in conflict management and mediation, and I see people, and it costs 200% of an person's annual salary if you lose a key person over conflict. So you want to retain them, and it might be that this person is just frustrated because they're not in the right place, but they're valuable. So find the place that will work for them. I just want to give a closing illustration. If you would pass that shirt to me. I was at a conference in Tampa, and I was in the hotel, and I thought I'd like to buy a Hawaiian shirt or something. And my problem is I'm colorblind. And so there was a young assistant trying to show me different shirts, and I couldn't decide. I need my wife to do that for me. And so an older woman, perhaps the manager, came in, and she walked up and she grabbed this shirt and she held it up against me. And she said, oh, that's Jew. That's Jew. You put that on, you go home, your wife, she see you, she go, ho, 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 ho. She said, that's Jew. My message to you today is, what's you? You gotta be you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much for your attention.